mean, if you're in a relationship and the person is irritating you with something they've done, you might be highly motivated not to say anything about it because you want to keep the peace. You don't want to upset them. You don't want the conflict. That's all characteristic of high agreeableness. But once you decide to tell the truth, then if you're annoyed, you don't get to hide it. You don't get to assume you're right. You don't get to grab the person by the shirt collar and say, look, I'm annoyed and you're wrong. You get to say, I'm irritated about this situation and I need to think through that irritation to find out if I have a problem or if you have a problem, or if we both have a problem, or if it's a different problem altogether. But you can't hide the fact that the problem has made itself manifest.
You know, and I've often thought that I've been fortunate in my marriage, because you think, well, you get married and you live happily ever after. It's like, that's not it, is it? You don't want that even. You don't. What do you want? You want your partner to do just all she's going to do is sprinkle rose petals in front of you, right? And pat you on the back of the head and tell you how wonderful you are constantly, day after day. Man, you'd be so sick of that after well, maybe it'd take a month. But let's say 2 weeks. You'd be, because you know, she should be more on the side of who you could be than on the side of who you are. And if she's deluded enough or terrified enough to worship you in your current form, then, well, that doesn't say much for her. And it certainly isn't very helpful for you. You want someone that's going to get in the way now and then, you know, and to contend with. And I've been fortunate in my marriage because I have someone to contend with, you know. We have our discussions, and they're not easy. Well, partly because we have hard problems to solve, because life is full of hard problems. I want someone who will stand up, you know, and have her say, even if it's not what I would say. And maybe I'm even willing at times, because she's quite intuitive and a good dreamer, and I'm more facile verbally. And so we have to be careful in our relationship, because if I'm in a particularly ornery mood and she has something to say, I can usually slice up her arguments verbally, you know, and that's fine as far as I'm concerned, because I get to win. But it's stupid. Well, it's stupid. It's, first of all, that doesn't mean I'm right. It just means I can formulate verbal arguments slightly faster than she can, but her intuitions and her dreams are often extraordinarily accurate. And so we've learned to some degree, to buttress each other's arguments just on the off chance that the person that you were foolish enough to marry might know something you don't now and then about something important, you know. And so what do you want? Well, you want someone to contend with. And then it's an adventure, you know, and then you have someone that you love and that you respect. And that's not a bad combination for longevity of relationship. And then maybe if you have someone that you love and respect and that you can communicate with, then your children also love and respect her or him. And then that's pretty good for them, because they've got some parents that they could love and respect. That's a good combination. You know, it solidifies their life. And so the issue is not so much the blindness of others, even though there's as much blindness among others as there is for you. But the issue here, the advice here, the description here is, you should be concerned about what's interfering with your own vision first. And you should leave other people the hell alone in relationship to that. And so if your mode of being in the world is, if you would just act better, things would improve for me, or if you identify the evil and the catastrophe as something that's outside, that someone else needs to fix, or that someone else is responsible for, then you're not going to fix that, and you're going to remain blind to the things that you're doing and not doing that make things not go well. And so it's just better to think, all right, I'm probably blind in many, many ways, And maybe there are some ways that I could rectify that, because it's highly probable that you're blind in all sorts of ways. I mean, in fact, it's virtually certain. And so it's just more useful to think, how is it that I'm wrong in this situation? I'll tell you something that I learned to do when I was arguing with my wife, which happened quite frequently, because when you actually communicate with people, you find out that there's many things that you don't agree on. And that's because you're actually different creatures. And so if you're actually going to have a truthful conversation, then you're going to find out that you don't see things the same way, and then you can either pretend that that's not the case and gloss over it and then end up in a 30-year silent war, or you can have the damn fight when you need to have it and see if you can straighten it out. So now and then we'd get in a situation where we were at loggerheads, we couldn't move, and you know, it would spiral up into hate speech, let's say. Because yeah, everyone laughs because they know they manifest plenty of hate speech towards those they love. So one of the things we learned to do was, when we hit an impasse, was to separate and to go our own ways, and to go sit and think, okay, look, we're at this unpleasant situation. We can't figure out how to move forward. I'd always think, of course it's her fault. Obviously it's her fault. At least 95%. But maybe there was something I did that contributed like 5% to it. And so I would sit and think and ask myself a question, which was, is there anything I did in the last 6 months that increased the probability that this impasse would manifest itself? And I'll tell you, you have no idea how fast your mind will generate an answer to a question like that, because there's undoubtedly some idiotic thing that you did, that you know, that you remember, that increased the probability that you're going to have your hands around the throat of the person that you love. And then you can go tell them that, and then you can have a conversation, especially if they do the same thing. Say, look, you know, here's how I'm an idiot in this situation. And the other person says, well, yeah, here's how I'm an idiot. And then you're two idiots, and then maybe you can have a conversation. So, thou hypocrite, first cast out the beam out of thine own eye, and then shalt thou see clearly to cast out the mote of thy brother's eye. That's, hey, hard to argue with that.
And that's something that people also don't understand, because they tend to think that, well, that all romantic interaction should be spontaneous. It's like, well, if that's your theory, then you might as well just give up right now if you're going to get married, because that, like, the only reason you can think that is because you don't have enough responsibility to make romantic entanglement virtually impossible. And what happens when you're married, especially when you have little kids, is that, and you both have a job, let's say, is you're so busy that the probability that you're going to find time for spontaneous mutual interaction decreases to 0. And so if that's what you're hoping for, then you're never going to have it. And so what you have to do is you have to make time for each other. And, you know, if you're dating, when you're establishing a relationship, well, you put some effort into it. You know, you decide that you're going to go out for dinner, and you dress up to some degree, and, you know, you try to present yourself to each other in some halfway mutually acceptable manner. And you hope that there's going to be a positive consequence of that, that you're going to find each other attractive. But then people somehow think that once they're married, that the same amount of effort isn't necessary, and that's wrong. I would say more effort is necessary on the same front, and you have to think it through. It's like, you know, if you don't want to be bitter about the intimate element of your relationship, how much time do you have to spend together each week? And my rule of thumb, sort of derived from clinical observations, is that you need to spend 90 minutes a week with your partner talking. And that means you're telling each other about your life and staying in touch, you know, so that you each know what the other is up to. And you're discussing what needs to be done to keep the household running smoothly. And you're laying out some mutually acceptable vision of how the next week or the next months are going to go together, right? So that keeps your narratives locked together like the strands in a rope. You need that for 90 minutes or you drift apart. And you need to spend intimate time together at least once a week, and probably more like twice. And that has to be negotiated. And if you don't negotiate it, and if you don't make it a priority, then it won't happen in all likelihood.
How does one save a marriage when it seems that there is no longer attraction, both physically and intellectually? There are kids involved, which is the main reason for wanting to save the marriage. Well, all right. I know a couple of things about that. I mean, the first thing I would say is that if you haven't had any intimate interaction with one another for quite a long period of time, that can put both people into a stagnant state where desire starts to slip away. What sex therapists recommend under such conditions is to, well, essentially in some ways start dating again. So you could ask your partner to go out to a movie or something like that. And, maybe when you come home, you could neck for a little while like teenagers. That's probably a word that no one uses anymore. But kind of pull back, and you got to agree, say, not to engage in full sexual activity for a while, but to tease each other and to play a bit. Even if you're not attracted, you have to act it out for a while, and hopefully you can get the motor running again. The other thing I would say is that you guys might want to sit down and make a joint plan. It's like because a marriage is like a story that two people are acting out simultaneously, and you have to have shared goals. And because you're both rowing the same boat, let's say, and if you don't have a destination in mind, then, well, maybe you're rowing in circles, or maybe you're just standing still. So I would say, work hard to put some romance back in the relationship. You could say to each other, well, look, let's try this for 6 months and just see how it goes. We'll have 2 dates a week. For the first month, we won't have any sex, but we'll play around. And then, we'll see how that goes. But we'll try it out for the whole 6 months. There are reasons to save a marriage. I mean, it's hard on kids. Divorce is really hard on kids, and it's hard on the adults involved too. So I would say you have to negotiate an agreement. And you could try the future authoring program, both of you. What I would recommend, for example, is that you each do the future authoring program separately. And then you could sit down and read each other's future authoring plans and see if you have some things in common. And then see if you can figure out how to support each other with regards to each of you obtaining what you want.